Hi everybody, welcome to week 8. Yes, week 8. We are almost halfway through the semester. I know it's hard to believe, but at the same time, I know many of you have multiple classes you're taking, multiple responsibilities with jobs and families. So on the bright side, we're almost halfway finished, so it's all downhill after this week. I'm not going to talk too long this time around, because if you've looked in the module, you'll see I have several videos from Eric Foner to talk about the topics we're covering this week: the Dred Scott decision and the Lecompton Constitution. Foner and the Columbia University offer those videos for use in educational settings like this. So I'm a firm believer in not reinventing the wheel, and he's a much better speaker and historian than I am, so I want to take the opportunity that he provides to let him talk to you about some of the material that we're covering this week. With that said, there are a few things I want to say. Number one, your objectives for this week: be sure you understand the Dred Scott decision and what the Chief Justice Taney Court comes up with in that decision. It's really critical as we move forward here. The court's basically going to decide three things. Is Scott a citizen? Is he free if he goes into free territory? And does Congress have the authority to limit or say anything about slavery? Very important, so pay attention to what Foner has to say, and by now I'm sure you've done your reading or will soon, and pay attention to what Potter has to say. Next, the Lecompton Constitution, what does it boil down to? Foner's also going to talk about that, and how the Constitution basically becomes a Constitution that doesn't decide, or doesn't give an option, I should say, for a free state. As you may know, or will soon know, as the Lecompton Constitution is presented, it has two clauses that will be determined or to be included in the Constitution. One says no slavery in the future, which means that any slaves already present and their descendants will remain, or slavery. So there is no real anti-slavery Constitution. With that said, I want to just kind of sum up where we're at as we move forward. After you listen to what Foner has to say, I want you to think throughout the 1850s, leading up to the Lecompton Constitution, what has happened? Let's go back to 1850 and the Fugitive Slave Act. Who wins there? Is that does the South get what they want with the Fugitive Slave Act? It would appear so, right? What about the Ostend Manifesto? Same thing. Remember, that was the declaration that we should annex Cuba or buy Cuba from Spain, and if they refuse to sell, we should consider the use of force. And of course, that appears to be a victory for the South. Notice I say appears. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which opens up what had previously been territories that prohibited slavery, now to the idea of popular sovereignty. Does that sound like a victory for the South? It does sound like a victory, right? And then this week, the 1857 Dred Scott decision, again, sounds like a victory for the South because of what the Supreme Court is going to say about that case. And finally, the Lecompton Constitution, which pro-slavery forces try to get through. It fails ultimately. Spoiler alert, sorry, it fails. But all of these things throughout the decade of the 1850s that appear to be victories for pro-slavery proponents. It sounds like things are going in their direction. All these things add up to really divide the nation, to get the anti-slavery supporters really kind of up in arms. No pun intended there. I know the war is coming, but we're not quite there yet. All these things add up to really put people at odds between the North and the South, between the anti-slavery and the pro-slavery factions. So think about those things as you read Potter, because he addresses that very specifically, and as you listen to Foner. Now with that, I want to touch on Soul by Soul. This week you only had one chapter to read in Johnson's book, and it's an interesting chapter because it talks about slaves and their own participation in their sale. And we think, well, that's strange, maybe that a slave would participate in their own sale, or take an active role in maybe manipulating their appearance or manipulating the thoughts of the buyer. But until recently, the last generation or so of historians, we unfortunately did not give a lot of credit to the fact that slaves were human beings, right? They're intelligent, they're capable, and they took an active role in their own survival in slavery. And they take an active role, as Johnson points out in the chapter this week, that they're very much aware that they're enslaved. They're very much aware that they're being sold. And wouldn't it be to their benefit to negotiate either outright or at least subconsciously try to manipulate the people that are purchasing or might purchase them, so that they go to the best buyer for their situation, the best chance for survival? And that's what they're after. Of course, the slave that goes to the owner that is not violent, or the slave that can get a job working in a house as opposed to in the fields, if they can just make that manipulation to get the right purchase. So we have to give slaves more credit, because they are human beings, they are intelligent, and they are capable of participating in their own enslavement. And understand what I mean when I say that. They're not willingly going off into slavery. That's not the goal. Of course, they don't want to be enslaved, but they are. And while they are enslaved, they are going to take an active role in the best outcome for them. We haven't talked a lot about it in this class, but going back, how have slaves resisted? We talk rebellion. That's always a popular topic, because we look back and we think rebellion. That's how you overthrow an oppressor, right? And enslaved people, they should rebel. Well, that's not so easy. When you are enslaved in the Deep South particularly, and you have no resources, and you have no place to go, and you have nobody to help you, probably you're not going to rebel. You may do things like break tools or pick cotton a little bit slowly, if that's your task. Or maybe I hate to say it, but maybe if you work in the kitchen, you might take some liberties when nobody's looking, when you're preparing your owner's food, right? So all these things are realistic ways that slaves resisted their enslavement, and taking part in their own sale is also a way, maybe not that they resist their enslavement, although I think it can be argued that they are in a form resisting, but in a way that they ensure that they are around for the next chance, if it's a chance to escape, or they're still there to be reunited with a lost family member, or they're still there for that day to come when they are emancipated. So we know that they're very much aware of what's going on, and we have to recognize that as we read and we think about their enslavement. Okay, I think that's it. Journal 3 will be due this week, so I've looked forward all semester particularly to this journal entry, because the Dred Scott case is such a divisive topic, right? Or such a divisive decision, I should say, for your characters, as maybe if you're an anti-slavery character, they read about Dred Scott, how shocked will they be? Same thing with the Lecompton Constitution. How upset would they be if they see what's happening in Kansas? All right, so be sure to get those done. Again, have a fellow student review. Just follow the instructions in the modules as usual. Like I said, the reason I have the review done, I appreciate, that you give each other feedback. I definitely want that. But I also want you to share ideas and to think when you read somebody else's journal entry to try to get in the head of their character, just like you're trying to get in the head of your character, because we have a variety of characters in class this semester, and it's awesome. So with that said, get with me if you have questions. I see questions pop up in the discussions sometimes, and I try to answer those, or sometimes emails, I try to answer those as well. Please, it's an online class, and I really encourage you to not hesitate. If you need a point of clarification, get with me. All right. Have a great week. If you're someplace where it's in the 60s today, as it is here where I live, enjoy this weather, and I look forward to reading Journal 3. Take care.